Good evening and welcome to the border zone. 176 people on board of Ukraine International Airlines flight were killed when it crashed shortly after takeoff from Imam Khomeini Airport in Tehran. I express my deep condolences to the families and friends of the victims. The Ukrainian embassy in Tehran said it has ruled out terrorism as a cause of the crash and that preliminary information shows it was caused by an engine malfunction. At the same time, Iran's Revolutionary Guards confirmed missiles attack against U.S. forces in Iraq. Iran launched a missile attack on U.S.-led forces in the early hours of Wednesday as a revenge for the U.S. drone strike on an Iranian commander whose killing has raised fears of a wider war in the Middle East. The situation changes every minute. To remind, U.S. President Donald Trump authorized airstrikes at the international airport of the Iraqi capital Baghdad, killed General Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force. His death has heightened tensions between the two countries and led to regional and international instability. While the U.S. said it would continue to take such action to protect its interests, Iran's leader Ayatollah Khamenei vowed severe revenge. Iran warned that the U.S. would pay a heavy price of this extremely dangerous escalation. General Qasem Soleimani wasn't only one of the most influential people in Iran, but also in Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. He was responsible for carrying out operations beyond Iran and was a major adversary of the United States and Israel. Soleimani has also gathered support for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Known as Shadow Commander for his indirect war against the United States, he was on the U.S. hit list for long because of his alleged role in deaths of thousands of civilians, including U.S. citizens in Iraq. Israel and Saudi Arabia were also working to eliminate Soleimani for his alleged attacks against diplomats and service members of these countries in various regions of the Middle East. Over a year back, Soleimani warned U.S. President Donald Trump of escalating war with Iran. Calling Trump a gambler, Soleimani said Iran was closer to the U.S. in places it might be not know. "You will start the war, but we will end it," he stated. What should we expect from the current escalation? Illegal aggression or fight against terrorism? Today my guest is the official representative of the U.S. Department of State, Ms. Morgан Ортагус. Ms. Ортагус, welcome to the Border Zone project. First of all, could you please evaluate the possibility of the real hot war to follow, considering ongoing crisis between Iran and the United States? People are really scared of such a development.
Sure. So there is no intention by President Trump to enter into a war with Iran. He's made that very clear since the beginning of his administration. He said two things, and that is that he wants a peaceful resolution with Iran, that he doesn't want a war, but he's also said very publicly that he will not allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. And so that's really what we're focused on here. We took actions, the president took actions that we believe will restore deterrence. Iran has repeatedly begun conducting very provocative attacks against the United States and our allies for the past year, and even longer, but at least for the past year. And of course, in the days leading up to the strike of Qasem Soleimani, we saw an American service members were injured, an American was killed. We saw more attacks on the U.S. Embassy. And so that's why we decided, President Trump decided to take a measure that we believed would deter Iran from taking any further kinetic actions. And we hope this deters them from making any further unwise actions.
The murder of Soleimani is widely discussed and considered as a legal act of aggression and international law violation. Russian special forces kill people in Great Britain, Americans in Iraq. Where is the difference?
There's absolutely no comparison, and there's so many things that are factually wrong with what you just said, so let me try to take them all on. First of all, this was a targeting. This was not an assassination or a murder, as you just described it, is what happens to political officials. The United States has a law against that, so that's not what happened here. Qasem Soleimani, it's important to remember, was a designated terrorist by the United States and also, more importantly, by the UN Security Council. The whole world recognized that Qasem Soleimani was a terrorist. And so therefore, just as the Obama administration and the Bush administration has done, the President Trump made a decision to take out a terrorist. So equating President Trump's actions with the heinous acts that Russia commits overseas is just a barbaric and untruthful comparison.
But US declines to withdraw its forces from Iraq when they're asked to. Iranian parliament just approved a resolution where US Army and Pentagon are named terrorists. What is US position in this regard?
Well, I think most of the world thinks anything that the Iranian parliament is pursuing is a joke as it relates to designating the U.S. Again, U.S. designations can legally stand up at the United Nations Security Council, which all member states have to vote on of the Security Council have to vote on our people that we propose for designation as terrorists. So there's a big difference there. As it relates to Iraq, that's a much longer conversation. I would remind you that the Iraqi parliament passed a resolution. They did not pass a law. Acting Prime Minister Abdul Mahdi has resigned. He is leading a caretaker government. And so I think a lot remains to be seen as it relates to the resolution that was passed without the majority of Sunni and Kurdish parliamentarians present.
Do you consider Soleimani as an enemy of the United States, and if yes, why the reaction on his murder is such a different even among elites in the United States?
Well, of course he's an enemy. That's why he was taken off the battlefield. As it relates to the reaction in the United States, we have seen very, very positive support from many members of Congress and many of the American people that understood that he was the world's greatest terrorist. He was responsible for killing more Americans than any other terrorist other than Osama bin Laden. We always have people in a democracy who will disagree with policy. We have people that want to pursue different policies in the United States. That's because we're a democracy and people get to have differing opinions. They get to debate them and express those opinions. That's something that you won't see in Russia, for example.
You believe that different reactions in the U.S. on Soleimani case is an inner political process?
Yeah, so Secretary Pompeo was at the State Department podium today, and he actually talked about this. The last administration, and this isn't political, but they chose a different set of policies as it relates towards the Middle East, writ large, not just Iran. They chose to disengage from the Middle East. They chose to not lead in the Middle East. They also chose a policy that would allow the JCPOA, which of course gave the regime billions of dollars, that we then saw the regime did not use those billions of dollars for their own people, sadly. Instead, they chose to give that money to Kataib Hezbollah, to the Houthis, to Hezbollah, to a myriad of Iranian militias throughout the region. And so they chose to place terrorism over their own people. And that's why you've seen the protests of the Iraqi people and the Iranian people and the Lebanese people.
China and Russia openly support Iran. Europe and Turkey are also not very happy. How do you evaluate reactions from Europe, and do you think the US have any allies in this war?
Yeah, I think I disagree with the premise of your question. Again, it's important to remember that Russia and China are a part of the United Nations Security Council, and they were part of that vote and that decision to designate Qasem Soleimani as a terrorist, number one. Number two, as it relates to Europe, I would point you to the E3 statement put out by the Germans, the French, and the British yesterday morning. We were very encouraged by that statement. I think that was everyone understood the threat of Qasem Soleimani. The Germans have been very forward-leaning on this. Brian Hook briefed our special envoy as it relates to Iran issues here at the State Department, briefed NATO yesterday, and we are in constant communication with our allies. And in fact, Foreign Minister Raab will be here at the State Department in just a few days to meet with Secretary Pompeo on this and arrange a wide array of issues. So we are certainly working incredibly closely with our European allies on this issue and others.
The unity stays strong?
Listen, these are some of our closest allies in the world. They're not only NATO partners, they're partners that we share intelligence with, they're partners that we work on threats from around the world, whether it's the Russian threat, whether it's a threat of the Chinese Communist Party, whether it's the threat of ISIS. Our relationship is not limited to one issue. It's a very strong and robust relationship that has stood the test of time and will continue to do so.
Thank you for the interview.
Sure.